When I pulled into my driveway that Sunday evening, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, the wrong kind. My backyard was wide open. The privacy fence I had paid thousands of dollars to build, one approved by the HOA, permitted by the county, and installed completely inside my property line, was lying across my lawn in broken sections. Posts were cracked at the base. Boards were scattered like someone had taken a saw to them in a hurry. My climbing vines were ripped from the lattice. My drip irrigation line was sliced clean through, dripping into the dirt like a tiny crime scene. For a few seconds, I just sat in my car with both hands on the steering wheel, staring through the rear gate. Then I saw Karen. She was standing on her back patio with a glass of iced tea in her hand. Looking straight at me, she didn't look surprised. She didn't look guilty. She looked relieved, like something ugly had finally been removed from her world. Karen had complained about that fence for almost a year. She said it blocked her view. She said it made her kitchen feel boxed in. She said people in nice neighborhoods did not hide behind walls. I had heard it at HOA meetings, in passive-aggressive emails, and once directly over the fence while I was watering my plants. But seeing it cut down was different. That was not a complaint anymore. That was someone crossing a line, literally and legally. I got out of the car, walked slowly to the backyard, and forced myself not to speak to her. Not yet, because I already knew there was one thing Karen had forgotten. The small black security camera mounted under my back eave had a clear view of the entire fence line. It had night vision, it had audio, and while I had been out of town visiting my sister, it had been recording every second at that moment. Karen probably thought she had won. She probably thought I would yell file a weak hoe complaint, maybe pay to replace the fence myself, and eventually give up because she was loud, stubborn, and used to getting her way. She had no idea that by the time this was over, her little view problem would cost her $47,000. Not because I screamed louder, not because I played dirty, but because the camera saw everything. The county records backed me up, and Karen made the worst mistake a neighbor can make. She destroyed property that was never hers to touch. I never bought that house because I wanted to impress anyone. I bought it because after years of renting apartments with thin walls, assigned parking spaces, upstairs neighbors, landlords who could raise the rent with one email, I wanted one place in the world that felt like mine. It was not a mansion. It was a modest 3-bedroom house at the end of a quiet subdivision, with a 2-car garage, a small front porch, and a backyard that backed up to a narrow strip of county-maintained green space. There were old oak trees behind the property, a walking trail beyond that. And in the evenings, when the sun dropped behind the branches, the whole yard turned gold. That backyard was the reason I stretched my budget. When I toured the house, I remember standing near the back door and thinking, this is where I can finally breathe. I pictured Saturday mornings with coffee on the patio, tomatoes in raised garden beds, my dog running circles in the grass, and maybe someday, a little fire pit where my family could sit when they visited. I did not know much about hoes back then, except that mine had rules about paint colors, landscaping, trash bins, and fence height. So before I changed anything, I tried to do everything the right way. I read the community guidelines twice. I filled out the architectural request form. I hired a licensed fence contractor, for a copy of the property survey from closing, and called the county office to ask whether I needed a permit. When they told me I did, I applied for one. I kept the receipt. I kept the inspection approval. I kept every email from the HOA board saying the fence style, color, and height were acceptable. I wanted privacy, not drama. The fence was 6 feet tall, stained a warm cedar color, and built completely inside my property line. It did not block a public sidewalk. It did not interfere with drainage. It did not cross an easement. It was exactly the kind of fence dozens of other homes in the neighborhood already had. For the first few months, I loved it. I planted jasmine along one section and climbing roses near the back corner. I installed a small drip irrigation line so the plants would survive the summer heat. I put 2 chairs on the patio, hung string lights from the pergola, and for the first time in years, I could sit outside without feeling like every neighbor's window was aimed at me. Then Karen started making comments. Karen lived directly behind me, across the rear property line. Her kitchen windows faced my backyard, and before my fence went up, she had a wide open view across my lawn, through my patio, and all the way to the trees. I never thought of my backyard as her view. I thought of it as my backyard, but Karen clearly felt differently. The first time she mentioned it, she smiled like she was joking. That fence really changed the feel back here, she said one afternoon, leaning over the old survey marker area while I was watering my plants. It used to feel so open. I smiled back and said, yeah, I wanted a little more privacy. Her smile tightened. Well, some of us bought here for the view. I did not argue. I just nodded and went back to watering. After that, the comments kept coming. At first, they were small. She said the cedar stain was too dark. Then she said the height was aggressive. Then she said privacy fences were what people built when they had something to hide. One evening, while I was sitting outside with my dog, I heard her tell another neighbor that my backyard looked like a stockade. I tried to ignore it because I knew the truth. The HOA had approved it. The county had permitted it. The contractor had built it correctly. And honestly, I had worked too hard for that house to let one bitter neighbor ruin the peace I had finally earned. But Karen was not the kind of person who let things go. She started showing up at HOA meetings with printed photos of my fence. She claimed it disrupted the visual harmony of the neighborhood. She said it blocked natural scenery. She argued that because her house was built before mine changed ownership, she had a reasonable expectation that her view would remain the same. The HOA president looked uncomfortable every time she brought it up because the board had already approved the project. But Karen had a way of making every meeting about herself. She spoke like she was defending the entire community, even when everyone knew she was just angry. She could no longer look straight into my yard. I stayed polite. I brought copies of my approval email. I brought the permit. I brought the survey. I never raised my voice. That might be the part Karen misunderstood. She thought calm meant weak. She thought because I did not argue with her in the street, I would eventually give in, she thought, because I was younger than most of the people on the board. I did not understand property rights, HOA rules, or the value of keeping paper records. She was wrong. That fence was not just wood and nails to me. It was the first boundary I had ever been able to build around a life I owned. It was my quiet mornings, my safe evenings. Her dog's yard, my garden, my family's gathering place, and the small piece of peace I had spent years saving for. So when Karen kept saying it ruined her view, I kept thinking the same thing. Her view was not on my deed. And if you have ever dealt with a neighbor who thinks your property is just an extension of their preferences, you probably know exactly how exhausting that kind of entitlement can be. Some people do not want compromise, they want control. And Karen was about to prove that she wanted control badly enough to destroy what she had no right to touch. The week before Karen cut down my fence, she stopped pretending. This was about neighborhood charm. It started with an HOA email. The subject line said, "Concern regarding rear fence condition and community visibility." At first, I thought maybe the board was forwarding a general reminder, the kind of thing they sent when trash cans stayed out too long, or people forgot to edge their lawns. But when I opened it, there were 3 photos of my backyard fence attached. All 3 photos had been taken from Karen's side. One showed the cedar boards from behind her patio furniture. One was zoomed in on the top rail. The third was angled through the branches of a crepe myrtle tree on her property, like she had been hunting for the ugliest possible perspective. The message itself was written in that polished HOA language that always sounds polite while quietly threatening you. That said, the board had received a complaint that my fence might be negatively affecting the visual openness of the rear greenbelt area. It asked me to confirm that the fence was approved, permitted, and compliant with community standards. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I calmly replied with the same documents I had already sent before. The HOA architectural approval, county permit, the final inspection note, the contractor invoice, and the survey showing the fence inside my property line. I also added one sentence at the end. This fence was fully approved before installation. No part of it is located on common area, HOA property, or a neighboring lot. The HOA president wrote back 2 hours later and said, "Thank you. This appears to resolve the issue." I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt watched because someone had been standing behind my house, photographing my fence, building a case against something that was already legal. I knew exactly who it was. 2 days later, I found a folded note tucked halfway under my front doormat. Not mailed, not posted properly. Just placed there, it said, "Please be considerate of the homes behind you. Your fence has created an unfair obstruction. We all deserve to enjoy the natural view we paid for." There was no signature. There did not need to be that evening while I was trimming dead leaves from my tomato plants. Karen appeared on her patio. She did not call my name at first. She just stood there, arms crossed, watching me through the narrow gap where two fence boards met near a post. Then she said, "So, the HOA is just letting you keep that thing?" I took a breath before answering. They approved it before I built it. That doesn't mean it was right. It means it was allowed. She gave a sharp little laugh. Allowed by paperwork, maybe, but not by common decency. I turned off the hose and looked toward her voice. I could not see all of her face through the fence, only pieces of her through the slats. But I could hear the anger clearly. "Karen," I said, "this fence is on my property. It was approved. I am not taking it down for a moment." She said nothing. Then her voice dropped. "No, when a neighbor refuses to be reasonable, the neighborhood usually finds a way to correct the problem." That sentence stayed with me. Not because it was loud. It was tea. She said it calmly, almost casually, like she was commenting on the weather, but there was something in it that made the back of my neck tighten. I did not respond. I picked up my pruning shears, went inside, and locked the back door. The next morning, I checked my mailbox and found another HOA notice. This one claimed someone had reported possible deterioration of my rear fence due to visible plant overgrowth and structural leaning. It was ridiculous. The fence was less than a year old. The jasmine had just started climbing along one side, and nothing was leaning. I walked outside and inspected every post myself. Solid, straight, clean. Then I took pictures of the entire fence line, mostly out of frustration. I did not know those photos would matter later. I just wanted proof that my fence was perfectly fine, before Karen's version of reality turned into another HOA complaint. On Friday afternoon, I left town to visit my sister. She lived about 3 hours away, and we had planned the weekend for months. I packed a small bag, checked the windows, set the thermostat, and made sure my dog was with the sitter. Before I backed out of the driveway, I glanced at the backyard camera feed on my phone. Everything looked normal. The fence stood there exactly the way it always had. Warm cedar boards glowing in the late sun, vines curled along the lattice, patio chairs. Tucked neatly under the pergola, by Sunday evening, it was destroyed. When I got home, the damage looked even worse, up close than it had from the driveway. Whoever cut it down had not simply removed panels, or had attacked it. Several boards had been sliced unevenly, leaving jagged edges. 2 posts were cracked at ground level, where someone had tried to force them sideways, instead of unbolting anything properly. One section had fallen into my raised garden bed, snapping tomato cages and crushing basil plants. Another section had been dragged across the grass, leaving a brown scar where the boards scraped the lawn. The drip irrigation line I had installed myself was cut in 2 places. Water had soaked the soil near the back corner until it turned muddy. My climbing roses, which had just started to bloom, were ripped away from their support and left tangled in splinters. I stood there, breathing hard, trying to process the fact that someone had entered my yard while I was gone and destroyed a structure attached to my home life, my privacy, and my peace. Then Karen spoke from the other side. "Well," she said, "I guess it finally opened things up." I turned slowly. She was standing on her patio, like she had been waiting for me to notice her. Her hair was pulled back. Her sunglasses were resting on top of her head. She had that same glass of iced tea in her hand, like this was a neighborhood show, and she had the best seat. "What happened to my fence?" I asked. She tilted her head. "Maybe it was as sturdy as you thought. It was cut," she shrugged. "Wood rots. Plants pull things down. Storms happen." There wasn't a storm then. Maybe someone finally got tired of looking at it. That was the first moment I truly understood how far she was willing to go. She was not even trying very hard to hide it. She wanted me to know. She wanted me to feel powerless. She wanted me to understand that if the HOA would not force me to remove my fence, she would find another way. I stepped closer to the broken boards, but stayed on my side of the yard. "You do this?" Karen smiled, not a big smile, not a laugh, just a small, satisfied curve of her mouth. "Don't be dramatic. It's a fence. It's my fence. It was an eyesore. It was approved." She waved one hand, like approvals were just little inconveniences. People hide behind rules when they know they being bad neighbors. I looked at the torn vines, the cracked posts, the sliced irrigation line, and the open view from her kitchen windows straight into what used to be my private yard. Then she said the line that made everything inside me go cold. Honestly, you should thank whoever did it. The whole area looks better now. I wanted to yell. I wanted to tell her exactly what I thought of her view, her entitlement, and her fake concern for the community. I wanted to march over there and demand answers until every neighbor came outside. But I did not, because the more Karen talked, the more confident she sounded, and the more confident she sounded, the more I realized she had not considered one simple thing. My house had cameras, not decorative cameras, not fake plastic domes, real cameras, motion activated, cloud backed up, mounted high under the eaves, where no one standing at ground level would think to look unless they already knew they were there. And the rear camera faced the fence line. So while Karen stood there, acting like she had outsmarted me, I looked up at the corner of my roof and felt my anger settle into something quieter, something sharper. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera app, and saw dozens of motion alerts from Saturday morning. A person walking along the back fence, another person carrying a power saw, a wheelbarrow, boards falling, Karen's bright blue gardening gloves, her face, her voice. My thumb hovered over the first clip. But I did not play it yet, not in front of her, not while she was still smiling like she had won. Instead, I took one slow picture of the damage, then another, then another. Karen laughed under her breath. Really going to make this a whole thing? I looked at the broken fence, then at my phone, then back toward her patio. No, I said calmly, you already did. That was the last thing I said to her that day. From that moment on, this was no longer a neighbor disagreement. It was no longer about view, taste, cedar stain, or HOA opinions. It was about trespass. It was about property damage. It was about a woman who thought her preference mattered more than my deed. And Karen had just left me a weekend's worth of evidence. I waited until I was inside the house before I played the first video. That was the hardest part. Every instinct in me wanted to stand in the yard, hold up my phone, and let Karen hear her own voice coming through the speaker. I wanted to watch that smug little smile disappear from her face. I wanted to say you forgot the camera and see the panic hit her in real time. But I didn't, because if there was one thing I had learned from dealing with HOA's contractors, permits, and county offices, it was this. The person who documents first usually wins later. So I locked the back door, sat at my kitchen table, opened my security app, and started saving everything. The first motion clip was from Saturday morning at 8:17 a.m. Karen appeared at the edge of the frame, wearing a sun hat, dark leggings, and bright blue gardening gloves. She was not on her patio. She was not standing on her side of the fence. She was inside my yard, just a few steps beyond the broken rear gate area where two fence panels met. I froze the video and stared at the screen. There it was. Not an accident, not storm damage, not rot, not some mysterious neighborhood misunderstanding. Karen was on my property. The second clip started 3 minutes later. A man I did not recognize came into view carrying a power saw. He wore work boots, a gray shirt, and no company logo that I could see. Karen pointed toward the fence line, then tapped one of the posts with her gloved hand. The man said something I could not make out at first, so I raised the volume. Then Karen's voice came through clearly. Just cut it low. He'll have to replace the whole thing anyway. I stopped the video. For a moment, I did not even breathe. She had not just allowed it. She had not just watched it. She had directed it. I played the clip again. Then I downloaded it. I backed it up to my laptop. Then I uploaded it to a cloud folder. Then I emailed a copy to myself with the subject line, "Fence damage video evidence." I did that with every clip. There were 26 motion alerts between 8:17 a.m. and 11:42 a.m. that Saturday. Not all of them showed everything, but together they told the story piece by piece. Karen walking through the gap, the man cutting boards, panels falling inward onto my lawn, Karen dragging vines away from the fence like she was clearing a work area, the man using a wheelbarrow to move broken pieces toward Karen's side, then changing his mind and dumping them back on my grass. Karen standing with one hand on her hip, looking up at my house once, but never high enough to notice the camera under the eave. One clip caught the saw biting through the post near my rose trellis. Another caught her saying, "The HOA should have made him do this months ago." Another showed her holding up her phone and taking a picture of the open yard after the panels were down. That one bothered me more than I expected. She destroyed my privacy, then photographed the result like it was proof of improvement. I made a folder on my computer and named it with the date. Inside it, I created subfolders: video, photos, HOA documents, permits, survey, contractor, insurance, sheriff. It felt excessive at first, but I forced myself to treat it like a file, not a feud. Then I went back outside. I did not go near Karen's property. I did not touch anything that might later matter. I simply walked the entire length of my yard and photographed the damage from every angle. I took wide shots showing the open rear property line. I took close-ups of the saw cuts. I photographed the cracked posts, the broken concrete around the bases, the crushed tomato cages, the damaged jasmine, the torn rose canes, the sliced irrigation tubing, the muddy soil, and the drag marks in the grass. I placed a tape measure next to the cut posts and photographed that too. I took pictures of the camera itself, showing where it was mounted and what direction it faced. Then I took screenshots from the camera app, showing the timestamps of each motion alert. After that, I pulled out my closing folder. Most people hate paperwork. I had always hated it too, until that night. That night, every boring document I had saved felt like armor. I found the property survey from when I bought the house. The rear boundary was marked clearly, with the green belt behind it, and Karen Oss lot on the other side. I found the contractor proposal showing the fence was to be installed inside my property line. I found the HOA approval email dated 8 months earlier with the exact fence height, material, stain color, and location approved by the architectural committee. Then I found the county permit. That was the document Karen had always ignored when she talked about the fence like it was some illegal wall I had thrown up in the night. The permit listed the project as a residential privacy fence. It had an inspection note marked final, it had the county seal, it had the date. I scanned it again, even though I already had a digital copy. By midnight, I had a complete timeline. First HOA approval, then county permit, then installation, then Karen's complaints, then anonymous notes, then the HOA notices triggered by her photos, and her threat about the neighborhood correcting the problem. Then the weekend I left town, then the camera footage, then the destruction. The next morning, I called the fence contractor who had built the original fence. His name was Mike, and when I explained what happened, he went quiet for a second. "She cut down the whole back run?" he asked. "Not all of it," I said, "but enough that I don't think it can be patched." "Send me photos." I sent everything except the videos. Within an hour, he called back and said what I already suspected. "This isn't a repair job. They compromised the posts. Some of those cuts are below usable height. Concrete footings may have to come out. And if they tore out your vines and irrigation, that's separate damage." "How much are we talking?" I asked. He sighed. "To put it back the right way? With removal, disposal, new posts, new panels, stain matching, and labor, it's not going to be cheap." His written estimate came later that afternoon. It was higher than I expected, but he included detailed line items: demolition of damaged materials, extraction of broken post footings, replacement of cedar panels, concrete, labor, disposal, stain, and site cleanup. I also wrote one sentence that mattered: "Damage appears consistent with intentional cutting and forced removal, not weather-related failure." I saved that too. Then I called my homeowner's insurance. I expected them to tell me it was a neighbor dispute and not their problem. Instead, the adjuster listened carefully and asked whether I had a police report yet. "Not yet," I said. "You should file one," she told me. "If someone entered your property and intentionally damaged a permitted structure, we need documentation. Also save every video clip separately and do not alter the originals." That was the first time someone official used the word intentionally. It made my stomach twist, but it also steadied me. Next, I called the non-emergency sheriff's office number. A deputy came out that evening. I walked him through the yard, showed him the damage, and then showed him selected clips from the camera. He watched without saying much, but when Karen's voice came through the audio saying, "Just cut it low," his eyebrows lifted slightly. He asked, "That's your neighbor?" "Yes." "And this fence is on your property?" "Yes. I have the survey and permit." "Inside," he nodded. "I'll include that in the report. But you may want a current surveyor to mark the line. If this turns into a civil claim." That became the next item on my list. The following morning, I called a licensed surveyor. It cost more than I wanted to spend. especially after seeing the fence estimate. But I knew Karen would try to claim the fence was on a shared boundary, or that she thought part of it belonged to her. People like Karen did not stop at one lie. They built new lies around the old ones until someone forced them back to facts. The surveyor scheduled me for Thursday while I waited. I printed everything. I printed the HOA approval email. I printed the permit. I printed the original survey. I printed photos of the fence before the damage, including the ones I had taken after Karen complained about leaning. I printed the contractor estimate. I printed screenshots of the video timestamps. I printed Karen S. anonymous note, even though she had not signed it, because the wording matched almost exactly what she had said at HOA meetings about the natural view. Then I called a civil attorney. I did not want a lawsuit. I did not want to spend months fighting my neighbor. I did not want court dates, depositions, letters, or bills. I just wanted my fence back and my yard private again. But when I described the footage, the attorney did not sound surprised. "Do not contact her directly anymore," he said. "Do not accuse her in writing. Do not post the video online. Do not argue with the HOA, except in documented emails. Let the evidence do the talking." That advice probably saved me from making the kind of emotional mistake Karen was hoping for, because Karen had already started trying to shape the story that same afternoon. The HOA board member forwarded me another complaint. Karen had claimed the rear fence collapsed due to neglect, and that I had left hazardous debris visible from neighboring lots. She demanded that the HOA require me to clean it up immediately and restore the open greenbelt appearance. I read that sentence 3 times. She had cut down my fence, left the debris in my yard, and then complained that the debris was my violation. For about 10 seconds I saw red. Then I remembered what the attorney said. I replied with one paragraph: "Please preserve all complaints." Photographs, emails, meeting notes, and communications related to my rear fence. The damage was not caused by neglect or weather. A sheriff's report has been initiated, and I am gathering documentation for a property damage claim. Until the matter is reviewed, please do not issue violation notices based on third-party complaints without inspection. I attached nothing. Not yet. I wanted the HOA to put their next move in writing. However, did not wait. That evening, she appeared near the broken fence line again. I saw her from my kitchen window, standing just beyond the opening where my privacy used to be. She looked into my yard like the missing fence had given her permission to study everything: my patio furniture, my plants, my back door, my windows. Then she called out, "Are you going to clean this up or just leave it like a dump?" I opened the back door but did not step outside. "Please leave my property line alone," I said. She laughed. "Your property line? That fence was practically in my face. The sheriff has the report." I wiped the smile off her face for the first time. Only for a second, but I saw it. Then she recovered. "Oh, please. The sheriff isn't going to care about a fence." I said nothing. She lifted her chin, and good luck proving anything. "Maybe your cheap fence just fell apart." That was when I realized she still did not know about the camera. She knew I had called the sheriff. She knew I was angry. She knew I was gathering paperwork. But she did not know that I had her on video in my yard, directing a man with a power saw. So I let her keep talking. I let her think the case would come down to her word against mine. I let her think the HOA drama would exhaust me. I let her think I was just another homeowner who would get intimidated by official-looking notices and neighborhood gossip. By Thursday morning, the surveyor arrived with equipment, stakes, flags, and a tablet full of county parcel data. Karen came outside within 5 minutes. Of course she did. She stood on her patio, her arms folded, watching the surveyor set up near the rear corner. Then she called across the open space. "You know, those old surveys are not always accurate." The surveyor did not even look up. I almost smiled, because for the first time since I had come home to that destroyed fence, Karen was not performing for me. She was performing for a professional who did not care about her view, her feelings, or her version of neighborhood beauty. He cared about measurements, and measurements were exactly what Karen should have been afraid of. The surveyor started at the front corner of my lot, not the back fence. Karen seemed annoyed by that. She stood on her patio with a mug in her hand, watching him move slowly along the side yard, checking points, comparing measurements, and placing small flags in the ground to her. I think it looked boring, maybe even unnecessary. She had spent so much time talking about the view and the feel of the neighborhood that she seemed genuinely irritated by the idea that land could be decided by numbers instead of opinions. But land does not care about opinions. Land has records, pins, measurements, deeds, legal descriptions, and every flag the surveyor placed made Karen's confidence look a little thinner. I stayed back near my patio and let him work. I did not hover. I did not point at Karen. I did not try to influence anything. I had already sent him the closing survey, the county parcel information, and the fence contractor as original layout notes. Now I wanted an independent professional to tell me what was true. Karen called out once, that fence was built too close to my property. The surveyor looked up for maybe half a second. I'll determine the boundary, he said. Then he went back to work. That was all. No debate, no emotion, no neighborhood politics. Just facts. After almost an hour, he reached the rear corner where the fence had been cut down. He used a metal detector to locate the property pin near the greenbelt side, then measured back toward the opposite corner. He marked the line with bright orange flags, each one standing in the grass like a little warning Karen should have respected months earlier. When he was done, he walked over to me with his tablet. "If you're going to want this in writing," he said. My stomach tightened. "Is there a problem?" He looked toward the broken fence posts, then back at the flagged line. "No problem for you." The fence wasn't T on the boundary. I blinked. "What do you mean?" He pointed. "Your fence was inside property line, about 18 inches in, give or take a little, depending on the section. Whoever removed it had to come onto your lot to do it." For a second, the whole yard seemed to go still. I had believed the fence was inside my line because that was what the contractor had promised. I had the old survey. I had the permit. I knew I had done everything right. But hearing a licensed surveyor say it in that calm, professional voice made something shift. This was no longer Karen, claiming a shared fence had bothered her. This was not even a gray area. The fence had been entirely mine, sitting entirely on my land, and she had crossed onto my property to destroy it. Karen must have seen something in my face, because she stepped closer to the open line and said, "That can't be right." The surveyor did not answer her, so she tried again, louder. "That fence was practically on top of my patio. I've lived here longer than he has. I know where the line is." This time the surveyor looked at her. "Ma'am, the recorded boundary is marked here." He pointed to the flags. Karen gave a sharp laugh. "Well, those flags are wrong," he shrugged slightly, the way professionals do when they have heard every version of denial before. "The report will include the measurements." Then he packed up his equipment. Karen stood there with her mouth tight, staring at the orange flags like they had personally insulted her. I said nothing. That was the first legal turn. The second came later that afternoon. When the surveyor emailed the preliminary drawing, the rear fence line was clearly shown inside my parcel. He had marked the damaged posts, the original fence placement, and the boundary itself. I also noted that the damaged structure did not appear to sit on common area, neighbor property, or any recorded easement. I forwarded it to my attorney. His reply came back within 20 minutes. "This is significant. Do not communicate with her. I am preparing a demand letter." I read that sentence 3 times. A demand letter. It sounded dramatic, but by then the file was no longer small. It had video of Karen inside my yard. It had audio of her directing the cutting. It had the surveyor confirming the fence was inside my property line. It had HOA approval. It had the county permit. It had the contractor's statement that the damage looked intentional. It had the insurance adjuster advising a report. It had the sheriff's case number. Karen still thought this was a neighborhood argument. It had become a paper trail. The next day, the HOA made the mistake that pushed everything even further. They sent me a violation notice. It said my rear yard contained visible debris and damaged fencing materials, and that I had 7 days to restore the area to community standards or face daily fines. I sat at my kitchen table, holding that letter. For a few seconds I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. Karen had destroyed the fence. Karen had left the debris. Karen had complained about the debris. Now the HOA, without inspecting the full situation or waiting for the sheriff's report, was threatening to fine me for being the victim of the damage. That was when my attorney stopped being polite. He sent the demand letter to Karen, copied the HOA management company, and attached a preservation notice. The letter was direct, professional, and cold. in a way my anger never could have been. I identified the fence as a permitted and HOA-approved structure located fully within my property. It cited the new survey. It referenced video footage showing Karen and a hired individual entering my property and intentionally cutting and removing sections of the fence. It demanded that Karen preserve all communications, invoices, text messages, photos, and payment records related to the removal. Then it listed the damages: fence replacement, post-removal, concrete footing extraction, stain matching, landscape restoration, irrigation repair, replacement of destroyed plants, surveyor fees, attorney fees, potential trespass damages, insurance claim deductible, and any HOA fines or losses caused by her false complaints. At the bottom, the letter gave her 10 business days to respond before we pursued further civil remedies. The same day, my attorney sent a separate letter to the HOA. That letter was even more satisfying. It reminded the board that my fence had been approved by them in writing. It attached their own approval email. It attached the county permit. It attached the surveyor's preliminary drawing. It informed them that the damage was the subject of a Sheriff S report and a pending civil claim. It warned them not to issue fines based on a complainant who was directly implicated in the destruction. It used one sentence that changed the entire tone. Any attempt to penalize our client for damage caused by a third party after receiving notice of the above evidence exposed the association to claims for bad faith enforcement and selective enforcement. Suddenly, the HOA became very careful. The management company replied within hours saying the violation notice was being placed on administrative hold, pending further review. That was HOA language for, "We may have stepped into something expensive." Karen, however, did not respond through an attorney. She sent me a text. I still do not know how she got my number. Maybe from an old neighborhood contact list. Maybe from the HOA directory. At 7:36 that evening, my phone buzzed. It said, "You are taking this way too far. That fence was a nuisance and everyone knows it." I did not reply. A second message came 2 minutes later. Prove I damaged anything. Lots of people had access to that area. I took a screenshot. A third message came. "If you try to sue me, I will tell the HOA you admitted. The fence was unsafe." I took another screenshot. Then came the message that my attorney later called a gift. I only had it removed because the board refused to do the right thing. I stared at that line. I only had it removed. There it was. Not, I don't know what happened. Not it fell down. Not someone else did it. She had typed the admission herself. I forwarded the screenshots to my attorney without responding. His reply was short. "Excellent. Do not engage." The next morning, Karen changed strategies. She emailed the HOA board, copied several neighbors, and wrote a long message claiming she was being harassed and threatened over an unfortunate fence misunderstanding. She said the fence had been on or near the shared boundary. She said she believed it was a community issue because it affected multiple sightlines. She said she had authorized cleanup of a deteriorating obstruction because she thought the HOA had jurisdiction over the rear greenbelt view. The email might have helped her if we had no records. But we had records. And the funniest part was that she attached 2 old HOA meeting minutes to support her claim. She clearly thought they showed the board had discussed my fence as a problem, showed the opposite. In those minutes, the architectural committee had confirmed that my fence application was approved. The objection period had passed, and no appeal had been filed within the required deadline. Karen had attended that meeting. Her name was listed under residents present. That meant she could not honestly claim she had no idea the fence was approved. My attorney noticed it immediately. He added the meeting minutes to the file and wrote a follow-up letter stating that Karen had actual notice of the fence approval months before the destruction. That one phrase. Actual notice changed the shape of everything. It made her actions look less like confusion and more like deliberate disregard. But the biggest surprise came from the county. Because Karen, in her effort to prove my fence was improper, had filed her own complaint with code enforcement. She claimed I had constructed an unpermitted barrier that interfered with the rear greenbelt setback. She asked the county to inspect my property and require removal of any non-compliant structures. I got the notice by email and almost could not believe it, even after cutting it down. I was still trying to prove the fence should never have existed. So I called the inspector listed on the notice and explained that the structure in question had already been destroyed by a neighbor. I had the original permit, and that I had a sheriff's report. The inspector paused, then asked me to send the permit number. I did. 20 minutes later, he called back. "You're fine," he said. "Your permit was closed properly. The fence was legal." Then he asked one question. "Does your neighbor have a patio extension near that rear setback?" I looked out my kitchen window toward Karen's yard. She did. A large stone patio with a built-in grill island and a pergola that had appeared sometime the previous spring. I had never paid much attention to it. It was her property. And unlike Karen, I did not spend my free time looking for ways to complain about other people's yards. "Yes," I said. "She has a patio back there." There was a pause. "Interesting." The inspector said. "We don't have a permit on file for that addition." That was the moment the whole thing turned completely. Karen had invited code enforcement into a fight about my legal fence. And the first illegal structure they noticed was hers. The inspector scheduled a site visit for the following week. He said he would verify my permit closeout, document the destroyed fence location, and review any nearby improvements affecting the rear setback and drainage area. I forwarded that to my attorney too. He called me instead of emailing. "She did this to herself," he said. I looked out at the broken fence, the orange survey flags, and Karen's patio in the distance. For days I had felt exposed. My yard was open. My privacy was gone. Karen could look straight into the space I had built to feel safe. But for the first time, I understood that exposure worked both ways. She had opened my yard. Now the county was about to open her records. And unlike me, Karen had not done everything by the book. At the end of that week, the evidence file had become almost ridiculous. We had video, audio, photos, a sheriff's report, a current survey, the original permit, HOA approval, HOA meeting minutes, Karen's written admission, a contractor estimate, insurance documentation, a code enforcement complaint she had filed herself, and a new county question about her unpermitted patio. Karen still tried to act confident in public. I saw her talking to neighbors near the mailbox kiosk, gesturing toward my house like she was the victim of some campaign. But her messages stopped. Her smug comments stopped. She no longer stood at the open fence line with iced tea in her hand. The flags were still there. The broken posts were still there. The camera was still watching. And for the first time since I had come home that Sunday evening, Karen was not controlling the story anymore. The documents were. The county inspector arrived on a Tuesday morning with a clipboard, a tablet, and the tired expression of a man who had already heard too many neighborhood stories before lunch. I met him in the driveway, before he even stepped into the backyard. I handed him a folder with copies of the permit, the HOA approval, the surveyor-S drawing, the fence contractor-S estimate, and the sheriff-S report number. I did not give a speech. I did not tell him Karen was a nightmare. I did not try to make him angry on my behalf. I just gave him the file. He flipped through the pages slowly, then looked up at me. "You kept all of this?" "Yes." "Good." That one word felt better than it probably should have. We walked around the side of the house to the backyard. The orange survey flags were still in place, bright against the grass. The broken fence sections were stacked where the contractor had told me to leave them until the insurance adjuster finished documenting the damage. The cut posts still stuck out of the ground like snapped bones. The inspector took photos first. He photographed the rear line, the destroyed posts, the permit label from my file, and the survey flags. Then he checked the measurements against the approved permit record on his tablet. After a few minutes, he said, "Your fence location matches the permit." I nodded, but I did not celebrate. "Not yet," he continued, walking the line, then stopped near the rear corner, where Karen's property came closest to mine. From there, her patio was impossible to miss. The stone surface extended behind her house with a built-in grill, a low retaining wall, and a pergola that sat close to the drainage swale near the greenbelt. Our inspector looked at it for a long moment. Then he asked, "That patio was added recently?" "I think last spring," I said. "I'm not sure." He typed something into his tablet across the open yard. Karen's back door slid open. Of course she had been watching. She stepped onto her patio, wearing sunglasses and a white cardigan, holding a folder of her own. She walked with the confidence of someone who believed confidence could substitute for paperwork. "Are you the county inspector?" she called. The inspector turned. "Yes, ma am." "Good," she said. "Then you should know that the fence he built was a violation from the beginning. It blocked the natural greenbelt view, and it was never appropriate for this community. The inspector looked down at his tablet, then back at her. I am here regarding a complaint about an unpermitted fence and possible setback issues. Exactly, Karen said. That fence.
Throw.
He pointed toward the broken posts in my yard. The fence was permitted. Karen's face stiffened. Well, maybe it had a permit, but that does to mean it should have been there. The permit is valid and closed, he said. The inspection passed. There was no argument in his voice, no irritation, just the flat tone of a man reading facts from a screen. Karen glanced at me, then back at him. I was told the HOA had authority over that rear view. The county does not enforce views, he said. I had to look away for a second, not because it was funny, because after nearly a year of Karen talking about her view, like it was a legal right carved into stone, hearing an inspector reduce it to nothing in 5 words was almost too satisfying. The county does not enforce views. Karen clearly did not like that answer. She opened her folder and pulled out printed photos. I recognized some of them immediately. They were the same pictures she had sent the HOA, the ones taken from her patio, zoomed in on my fence, like it was some criminal structure. She held them out. Look at this. You can see how oppressive it was. It ruined the whole open feel of the rear lots. The inspector did not take the photos. I am not here to evaluate whether you liked the fence. Her mouth opened, then closed, he continued. I do need to ask you about this patio extension. It changed everything. Karen blinked. My patio? Yes. Our records do not show a permit for the hardscape expansion, retaining wall, grill island, or pergola in this rear setback area. For the first time since I had known her, Karen had no immediate response. The inspector stepped closer to the property line, staying on the appropriate side, and looked down at his tablet again.
Do you have
permits for that work? Karen's voice sharpened. That has nothing to do with his fence. It may have to do with drainage, setback, and unpermitted construction, he said. We filed a complaint asking us to review improvements affecting this rear area. I am reviewing improvements affecting this rear area. The words landed so cleanly that even Karen seemed to understand she had trapped herself. She looked toward me like I had somehow arranged the county records against her personally. I did not give permission for you to inspect my property, she said. The inspector remained calm. We're not entering your property right now. Observing from adjacent areas and public records. If a formal inspection is required, you'll receive notice. Karen's jaw tightened. Because she could not help herself, she said. This is retaliation. The inspector looked at her over the top of his clipboard. Ma'am, you filed the complaint. That was the moment I knew Karen's version of the story was collapsing. Not because anyone yelled at her, not because anyone humiliated her, but because every official who showed up kept running into the same thing. Her feelings were loud, but her paperwork was empty. Her sheriff's deputy came back 2 days later to take a supplemental statement, after my attorney provided the survey and several video clips. This time, Karen did not come outside with iced tea. She came out fast, almost running, when she saw the patrol vehicle near my driveway. The deputy was standing in my yard, watching the video on my phone. The clip showed Karen in bright blue gloves pointing at the fence, while the man with the saw positioned the blade near the post. Her voice came through clearly. Just cut it low. I have to replace the whole thing anyway. The deputy asked me to replay that part. I did. Karen stopped at the edge of her patio. What is he showing you? She called. The deputy looked toward her. I'll speak with you in a moment. She folded her arms. This is a civil matter. The deputy did not move possibly. It is also a report of trespass and property damage. Karen's voice got louder. That fence affected my property. I had every right to address it. The deputy asked. Did you enter his yard? Karen hesitated. It was brief, but it was there. I entered the disputed area, she said. The deputy glanced at the orange survey flags. The surveyed line shows this is not a disputed area. Karen looked at the flags like she hated them. I don't accept that survey. The deputy's face did not change. You don't have to accept it for me to document it. That sentence stayed with me too. For months, Karen had acted like reality required her approval. If she did not accept the fence, it was wrong. If she did not accept the HOA approval, it did not count. If she did not accept the survey, the land somehow remained debatable. But legal records do not need a neighbor's permission to be real. The deputy took my statement, photographed the damage again, noted the survey markers, and asked for copies of the clips. I provided them on a flash drive along with the screenshots of Karen's text message, where she wrote, "I only had it removed because the board refused to do the right thing." He read that line twice. Then he asked, "She sent this to you?" "Yes, and you didn't respond, no good." There was that word again, good. Not dramatic, not emotional. Just confirmation that staying quiet had been the right move. While the sheriff's office handled its report, the insurance company sent an adjuster. She spent almost 2 hours documenting the yard. She measured the damaged sections, photographed the cut marks, reviewed the contractor's estimate, and asked about the destroyed landscaping. I walked her through what had been there before: the jasmine, the climbing roses, the irrigation line, tomato bed, the soil damage from dragging panels across the lawn. I had photos of all of it from before Karen's destruction, including pictures from family visits, gardening updates, and one accidental blessing, a short video I had taken of my dog running along the fence line the week before. The adjuster watched that video and said, "That helps show prior condition." Every little thing mattered. A photo I had taken because the roses looked pretty. A video I had taken because my dog looked happy. An email I had saved because I was cautious. A permit I had kept because paperwork made me nervous. All of it became part of the case. Then came the HOA meeting. I did not want to attend. The thought of sitting in a room with Karen, the board, and a dozen curious neighbors made my stomach hurt. But my attorney said I should be present, calm, and prepared. He could not attend that meeting without escalating things more than necessary. But he helped me prepare a packet and a short statement. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a beige room with folding chairs, bad coffee, and framed photos of subdivision landscaping projects on the wall. Karen arrived early. She sat in the front row with her folder on her lap, whispering to another homeowner who kept glancing back at me. She looked nervous, but she was trying to cover it with outrage. The HOA president called the meeting to order and eventually reached the agenda item listed as rear fence dispute and enforcement review. Karen immediately raised her hand. "I would like it noted," she said, "that this entire situation began because one homeowner installed an inappropriate barrier that damaged the open character of our neighborhood." The president looked tired. "The board has reviewed the architectural file," he said. "The fence was approved." Karen's mouth tightened. That approval should never have happened. Nevertheless, it did. A few people shifted in their chairs. Then the management representative spoke. She said the violation notice sent to me after the fence was damaged had been withdrawn. She said no fines would be assessed. She said, going forward, the HOA would require inspection and documentation before issuing notices based solely on homeowner complaints. That was the first public consequence. Small, but real. Then, the president looked at me. "You provided documentation that the fence was permitted and located inside your property line. Is there anything you'd like to add?" I stood up with my packet in my hands. The voice was not as steady as I wanted it to be, but it did not shake enough to stop me. I did not accuse Karen by name at first. I said my fence had been approved by the HOA, therefore permitted by the county, and built inside my property line. I said it had been intentionally destroyed while I was out of town. I said the matter had been reported to the sheriff and my insurance company. I said I had retained counsel. Then I said, "I am asking the board to stop treating this as a fence preference dispute. It is documented property damage." The room went quiet. Karen scoffed loudly. "Documented by who?" I looked at her. Then I looked back at the board. By the county surveyor, the permit record, the sheriff's report, the contractor, the insurance adjuster, and my security cameras. That last phrase changed the air in the room. Security cameras. Several heads turned toward Karen. Her face went pale, in a way no amount of indignation could hide. She looked down at her folder. For the rest of the meeting, she barely spoke. Afterward, 2 homeowners approached me quietly. One said Karen had complained about their shed for months until they repainted it. Another said she had reported their backyard lights 3 times, even though the lights met the rules. I realized then that Karen had not been powerful because she was right. She had been powerful because people were tired, busy, embarrassed, or afraid of becoming her next project. But this time, she had picked something too solid to talk her way around. By the following week, my attorney received a call from Karen's insurance carrier. That was when the case stopped feeling like a neighborhood feud and started feeling like what it had become: a liability claim. Her insurance company wanted the evidence. My attorney sent the demand package. Videos, photos, survey, contractor estimate, landscaping estimate, irrigation repair, HOA approval, permit, Sheriff S report, text admission, and a summary of fees. Karen S. carrier did not immediately agree to pay, of course. Insurance companies rarely open their checkbooks because someone asks nicely. They questioned the amount. They questioned whether all the damage was related. They questioned whether the landscaping value was too high. They questioned whether attorney fees would be recoverable, but they did not seriously question the central fact. Karen had been recorded entering my property and directing the destruction of my fence. That fact became the anchor. Everything else moved around it. The contractor revised the estimate after digging around one broken post and confirming the concrete footing had been fractured. The landscaper added a restoration quote for the damaged vines, roses, soil, and irrigation. The surveyor finalized his report. The HOA confirmed in writing that no violation would be issued to me. The county inspector closed my fence review with no violation and opened a separate inquiry into Karen's patio addition. Karen tried one last time to save face. She sent a long email to the HOA saying she had been misunderstood and that her only goal had been to preserve neighborhood beauty. She said she never intended for the situation to become legal. She said she felt targeted. The HOA did not reply publicly, but a week later, the board removed her from the Landscaping Advisory Committee. It was not a dramatic announcement. Just a small line in the meeting minutes, committee roster updated, but everyone knew what it meant. Karen had used that little title for years to act like she had authority over other people's yards. She had lost even that, and the county still had not finished with her patio. Karen held out longer than I expected, for almost 3 weeks after the HOA meeting. She acted like the settlement demand was just another neighborhood complaint she could outlast. She avoided looking at me when I checked the mail. She stopped standing on her patio with iced tea. She stopped making comments through the open rear yard, but every so often, I would catch her watching from behind her kitchen curtains, like she was waiting for the entire problem to somehow collapse under its own weight. It did not collapse, it got heavier. The county finished its review of her patio addition first. The inspector determined that the hardscape extension, grill island, retaining wall, and pergola all required permits she had never pulled. The drainage issue near the rear swale also had to be reviewed, because her patio had changed the way stormwater moved across the back of the lots. Karen tried to argue that it was decorative landscaping. The county called it unpermitted construction. She was ordered to submit retroactive permit applications, provide drawings, and remove or modify any portion that failed setback and drainage requirements. I never got the final total of what that cost her, but I saw 2 contractors at her house over the next month. One afternoon, part of the pergola came down. That alone would have been satisfying, but the fence case was still moving. Karen S. Insurance Company eventually requested mediation before things escalated into a formal lawsuit. Her attorney explained that mediation did not mean forgiveness. It meant everyone sat down, looked at the evidence, and decided whether paying now was smarter than paying more later. The meeting took place in a small conference room at my attorney's office. Karen came with a lawyer. She did not look like the same woman who had smiled at me over a broken fence. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in the way people look when their confidence has finally met consequences. Her lawyer did most of the talking. Karen mostly stared at the table. The mediator asked each side to summarize the issue. Karen S. lawyer tried to frame it as a misunderstanding between neighbors over a rear boundary feature. He said emotions had run high. He said Karen believed the fence affected the shared enjoyment of the greenbelt. He said the removal may have been poorly handled. My attorney let him finish. Then he opened the evidence folder. He did not raise his voice. He did not exaggerate. He simply laid out the timeline. HOA approval, county permit, final inspection. Fence built inside my property line. Repeated complaints from Karen. Anonymous note. HOA pressure. Threatening statement. My weekend out of town. Security footage. Audio of Karen directing the cuts. Survey showing the fence 18 inches inside my land. Text message where Karen wrote, I only had it removed because the board refused to do the right thing. Sheriff S. report, contractor estimate, landscape estimate, insurance claim. Withdrawn HOA notice. County inspection, confirming my fence was legal. By the time he finished, the room felt very quiet. Karen's lawyer asked for a private break. They were gone for almost 40 minutes. When they came back, nobody talked about misunderstandings anymore. They talked numbers. The first offer was low enough to be insulting. It barely covered the fence materials and ignored the landscaping, surveyor, deductible, and attorney fees. My attorney rejected it without even looking at me. The second offer was better, but still treated the damage like a simple repair. That was when my attorney played the clip. The whole thing. Just the part where Karen stood in my yard, pointed toward the post, and said, "Just cut it low. He'll have to replace the whole thing anyway." Karen closed her eyes. Her lawyer stopped writing. The mediator looked at the insurance representative. After that, the numbers changed. The final settlement came to $47,000. It covered the full fence replacement, removal of broken footings, new cedar panels, staining, labor disposal, irrigation repair, replacement landscaping, soil restoration, the surveyor's fee, my insurance deductible, part of my attorney fees, and a separate amount for trespass and loss of use of my yard. Karen did not personally hand me a check. Life is not always that cinematic. The payment came through insurance and settlement channels. There were signatures, release forms, conditions, and legal language. But the result was the same. Her view cost her $47,000, and she had to agree, in writing, to enter my property, touch any fence, structure, plant, camera, gate, or improvement on my land, or use the HOA process to file further bad faith complaints about the restored fence. That last part mattered to me almost as much as the money, because I did not just want the fence rebuilt. I wanted the boundary respected. The new fence went up 6 weeks after the day I found the old one destroyed. Whereas Mike, the original contractor, came back with his crew. This time, he set the posts deeper, documented every measurement, photographed every footing, and gave me a complete file before he left. Our cedar stain matched beautifully. The jasmine was gone, but I planted new climbing vines. The roses took longer to replace, and for a while, the back corner looked too bare. Like the yard remembered what had happened. I added 2 more cameras, not because I wanted to live paranoid, because trust is easier to keep when accountability is visible. HOA sent a formal letter confirming that the restored fence was approved and compliant. They also changed their complaint policy. From then on, homeowners had to submit evidence. The management company had to verify conditions before issuing violation notices. Anonymous complaints could no longer trigger enforcement by themselves. Karen lost her landscaping committee position permanently. At the next annual meeting, another homeowner ran for the board on a platform of fair enforcement and actual documentation. It was the most boring campaign slogan I had ever heard, and I loved it. Karen did not speak during public comments. She sat near the back, arms folded, looking like a person who had discovered that control is much less fun when everyone starts keeping records. As for her patio, part of it stayed, and part of it changed. The pergola never went back up the same way. A section of the retaining wall was removed, and for several weekends. Her backyard looked like a construction site. I did not celebrate out loud. I did not stand on my patio with a drink and watch her suffer the way she had watched my fence come down. Just let the county do its job. That was the difference between us. Karen thought power meant forcing your preference onto someone else's property. I learned that real power is quieter. It is a folder full of documents. It is a camera that records when you are not home. It is a permit number, a survey flag, an email archive, a calm statement to a deputy, and the patience not to ruin your own case by yelling at someone who wants you emotional. The first evening after the new fence was finished, I sat outside again. The yard was not perfect yet. The grass still had a few thin patches. The new vines were small. The patio felt a little too clean, like a room after something has been broken and replaced. But the privacy was back. The warm cedar boards caught the sunset. My dog sniffed along the fence line like he was inspecting the work for the first time in weeks. I exhaled. Behind the fence, I could hear Karen moving around on her patio. A chair scraped. A door opened, then closed. She did not say a word. And that silence felt better than any apology she could have given. I never got the old fence back. I never got back the weekends I spent angry, exposed and buried in paperwork. I never got back the roses she ripped down or the feeling of safety I had, before I saw her on camera inside my yard, but I got my boundary back. Got my yard back, and I got proof that sometimes the most satisfying revenge is not revenge at all. It is refusing to be intimidated, saving every receipt, reading every rule, calling the right office, and letting the truth become too organized to ignore. So if you ever find yourself dealing with a neighbor who thinks your property exists for their comfort, remember this: do not match their chaos. Document it, photograph it, save the emails, keep the permits, know your property line. Let professionals measure what entitled people try to blur. Karen wanted a better view. What she got was a $47,000 lesson in boundaries.